Hello everybody, it's Neil Foley from the Business Growth Club here today. I'm very fortunate to have with us today a long-standing friend of mine, Derek Scanlon, who's a digital advisor working with the Department for International Trade. How are you today then, Derek?
I'm very good, thank you. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Well, this is our second attempt at doing this recording. The first one I got wrong, so hopefully this one will go slightly better. So do you want to kick off, Derek, with describing what it is you do for the Department for International Trade and what you can do for small business owners?
Yes. So I'm a digital trade advisor. So my role is really to go into the hundreds and thousands of SMEs and help them to increase their export sales and their export exposure via digital channels. And in order to do that, I really do three things. One is diagnostics. So I look at their search visibility, the technical content audits of their websites, mobile apps, and see whether they're fit for purpose, and if not, what we can help them do to improve that. The second is route to market. So when we've decided on which export markets to explore, it's how do you get there, and there are two really key alternatives. One is to start translating what you do into the target market language and culture, and the other is to dip your toe in the water via what we call e-marketplaces. So you've heard of Amazon and eBay.
Yep.
But there are thousands of marketplaces that are sector specific, product specific, language specific. So we've gone out and done deals with 30 or 40 global marketplaces, and we help our clients to get onto those platforms a little bit cheaper than they could on their own,
Okay.
but also with some support.
Yeah.
So that's the second piece, how do I get there? The third piece is how do I get noticed? So a lot of the more attractive export markets are obviously attractive to everyone else in the UK and everyone else in the world. So it's a busy market. So how do you get your brand and product and your message to a level where it's visible to potential customers? And that part is really about understanding marketing channels, social media. So in China, for example, Facebook and Twitter don't exist. So how do we get to understand what tools there are and how we work with them most effectively? So it's how you get noticed.
Yeah. And in a crowded marketplace, that must be really...
It's hard
very
work,
tricky.
and I think one of the things we try and do is set the expectation that getting your product into a market outside the UK is just the first step.
Yeah.
Getting it noticed, making a sale, building relationships with customers, managing returns, it goes on and on and on. So it's just, it's hard work.
Yeah, I can
but
imagine.
can be very rewarding if done well.
And I guess quite a slow burn, isn't it, in terms of it's not an overnight thing, is it, this?
It varies, and I think it's a lot easier than it used to be. So with my area, which is digital, I think getting your product into a market and then testing the demand there and building your brand presence can be done in a matter of days and weeks.
Right,
So
okay.
before it could, you'd need a relationship, you'd need to understand the market, you'd need to visit. And so it would have taken an awful lot longer just to create a presence, let alone some sort of success. So digital makes access easier. But again, we go back to it makes access easier for everyone.
Yes.
So
the noise.
You're still cutting through, you're still competing.
Yes.
So.
And I guess over here, there's a temptation, well, I've certainly fallen into this trap of thinking Amazon is everything. But of course, in particular in the Far East, I don't think Amazon really even isn't even on the scale, is it?
Well, actually, outside of the UK and the US, Amazon isn't the market leader.
Really?
So we get...
And is that true in Europe as well, then?
In Europe as well, yes.
Really?
In particularly Eastern Europe, there are groups like Allegro, who are market leader in Poland and also top 3 in another dozen territories. So that's one of the reasons we looked at building relationships with different marketplaces in different territories, which it was the understanding that Amazon wasn't the be-all and end-all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in China, for example, they're blocked. So they,
Oh, are they?
well, they're blocked in certain categories. They do have a presence there, but it's not even 2%
Really?
market penetration. So it's dominated by local players like.
And is that a
Alibaba.
deliberate Chinese policy?
I mean, when it comes to social media, for example, yes,
Yeah.
it is a deliberate blocking, but also the successful marketplaces like Tmall, Alibaba Group, and other brands like JD.com, they understand their customers much better than an American company could, even if it had been there for 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
So the way people buy, their expectations of delivery, for example, which are sometimes same-day delivery anywhere in China.
That seems unbelievable, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It's such a huge country.
it is a huge country, but it's got probably the most sophisticated logistics
Really?
chain that you'll find anywhere. It really is quite very mature. And so, if you started from an equal footing, I don't think Amazon would have succeeded
No.
in any way better than they have, because it is a complex market that relies
Yeah.
very much on local knowledge.
So how do we get that local knowledge then? I mean, well, obviously use yourself as the advisor to point us in the right direction.
Yeah.
And is that then working with specialists and agents, etc., in something like China?
Well, I think the biggest value we bring is that once we've identified an export market, we have people on the ground, so people within the department and our sister department, which is the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. So we have local experts in our embassies and consulates, sometimes sector experts, so they might be an expert
really?
in fashion, for
Yeah.
example, and a mixture of civil servants from the UK, but also local people who get language, culture, buying patterns, and as I say, can often be deep experts in specific sectors. So they're really the conduit, the gateway, if you like, into that market, and how you create a presence in that market and become successful without learning a lot of difficult and expensive lessons.
Without learning the hard way.
Yeah, it's because, there will be British companies that have already learnt the hard way,
Yeah.
and they'll be able to bring their expertise and their knowledge of that to help smooth the process.
So it's not as simple as just saying, well, I could translate the website. I mean, forget Google Translate or whatever. But I mean, even if I paid a translator over here to properly do one into Mandarin or whatever, that doesn't actually culturally fit, does it?
Well, it can do. I think first of I would say is don't ever use Google Translate
Right, yeah.
at all. It will damage your brand. It makes you
Yep.
look not credible. So translation is one step, and professional translation is important. But also simple things like web design, page design, for example.
Are we all very different and have our
Very,
own
very
little
different.
identity on that?
So Chinese expectation is that a web page should be busy, animated, just things flying everywhere.
Really?
Lots and lots of deep detail about products. So pages of product
Really?
detail.
So it's very different from us, isn't it?
Absolutely,
Where we would
yeah.
say no
So-
simple bullet points, no more than
No,
5.
absolutely. They want to see all of the nitty-gritty.
Really?
So before making a purchasing decision. So it's understanding that, and understanding just simple things like if you're doing so we have a relationship with a Pan-Arabic e-marketplace. Green is good. So green is a good colour to have on your web page. In China, red is good, and it's just simple, obvious when you look back on it.
Yes.
But and the use of images, for example. So you've got to be careful about how you show fashion, for example. So if you're your UK homepage for women's fashion will be significantly different in the UK than it would be in Saudi Arabia, for example.
Yes. Yeah, no, I can understand that.
So, yeah, but again, our experts on the ground can help you with that local knowledge.
So even though they know it's a British product or a British service, they still want it displayed in the way that they're used to, in terms of, you say, the level of detail and about the product or service. They don't want a British site.
No, I think they want British products, and I
Yeah.
think British products that are quality,
Yeah.
high-end, have a significant part of the manufacturing process British, if possible.
Okay.
And also, very importantly, some sort of history and story, so a good marketing story. So a long-term brand, a Queen's Award,
Yeah.
Royal Warrant, a British celebrity that may have endorsed their product or been associated with their product. So the Britishness is in most territories a bonus,
Yeah.
but displaying that has to be local, has to be sympathetic.
Yeah.
So
Why do they like the Brits so much? I'm just thinking, the Opium Wars and all the rest
Oh,
of it.
the
I'm just
Chinese?
thinking- yeah, the
Oh,
Chinese.
no, we're
yeah,
talking
the-
specifically China.
Yeah.
It depends on the sector. So,
Are there some sectors that are more popular with the Chinese than others?
yes,
in
so
terms of Brits?
food and drink
Yep.
is a popular sector, and that's partly trust. So a lot of Chinese customers won't buy from Chinese websites.
Really? Well,
Beca-
because of perceived lack of quality control?
Well, there's been a history of food scandals, including baby formula milk.
I remember
and all
that one, yeah.
So when it comes to luxury foods, then they will buy direct from a reputable brand.
So even to a brand that's branded in English?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why big e-commerce suppliers are so popular, because they have a big brand behind.
Yeah.
They'll stand behind their products and they won't be counterfeit. And so you'll often find in some sectors that people will go to a UK website to buy rather than Chinese,
Will they?
and be happy to wait 5 to 6 weeks for delivery,
Really?
depending on the product. And fashion's a big sector,
Yep.
as you might expect. But if you were looking to sell gadgets or electronics, or obviously you're not going to compete again unless it's a very high end, maybe a British bespoke hi-fi component or something.
Yep.
But if it's mass market and below, then you're obviously not going to compete.
No.
So
And is China the biggest market? I know in terms of population and the burgeoning middle class and the rest of it. Is China the obvious one?
if you're looking for size and opportunity, yes. So this year, I think, or certainly next year, e-commerce in China will be bigger than the rest of the world's e-commerce markets combined.
God.
So everything in the US, Europe, everywhere else is going to be smaller than the e-commerce marketplace in China.
It's unbelievable figures.
It is. Well, I've got some figures here actually, because
Okay.
before our meeting. So I went to one of the presentations we do about the size of the market, for example, starts with geography, and so there are city-states all the way through. And we just had this nice stat that Shanghai's got 23 million people in it, in the city-state. But Beijing is 19 million, and to put that into context, that's bigger than the Netherlands.
Really?
So,
Just a city.
yeah. And top 10 cities, so you've got city-states that are bigger in population than Austria, Denmark.
Good grief.
So, and then you go on and on. So those are what we call the tier 1 cities, and there are
Yep.
tier 2 and 3.
And some of those are quite modern, I guess, the tier 2 and 3, are they?
Yeah, which is another reason why e-commerce in China is so popular. So a lot of the newer cities, some maybe 5 to 10 years old, and they've been thrown up very, very quickly, and to respond to a demand for that area to attract workers, attract business, factories, etc. So they often don't have what you'd see in most European cities, which you might have a retail centre, a
Yeah.
high street type thing. So they'll find a rapidly growing city of millions of people, but nowhere to shop in the sense that we would expect to. And that changes over time, but it doesn't change quickly enough. So people
hence
are now
people go e-commerce.
yeah, they go into small stores where you can browse catalogues, digital catalogues, and buy on your smartphone and have it delivered the next day.
So it's sort of like an upmarket Argos.
It is, yeah. It's called online to offline,
Right,
and
okay.
it is probably easiest to understand it as an Argos model.
Yeah.
Where you basically got a warehouse full
Yeah.
of product, and a very small store at the front where some products are displayed, but mostly they're digital. And so you can, go in there, order on your smartphone, and it can be delivered pretty much anywhere in China within 24 hours.
That seems staggering. I know you mentioned that at the beginning, the logistics side of things. How on earth do they manage to do that? They must have spent oodles of money. And is that where the big boys are really just trying to carve the market for themselves? Because you must need huge sums to be able to get that network.
Well, I think that there's been two approaches. One is organic, and so you've got a big population. You've got mature logistics, and so you can piggyback onto that. And I think that's what Alibaba have done. They've relied on third-party logistics, and you can do what JD.com have done, which is grow a logistics supply chain yourself to have more control over that delivery. So they're the second player in the market, but they're expanding rapidly and eating into Alibaba's market share because they have much better delivery commitments and satisfaction levels. So.
And are they working on the same sort of model as Amazon in terms of they're just taking a cut or charging a commission or?
Yes, pretty much. So you can have your own store on Tmall, which you'll pay them up front for, and they'll market for you. There will be listing fees, and there'll also be commissions on sales. And the bigger brands will negotiate a model that suits them best. So it's up for grabs. There's no hard and fast rules. But generally, you'll be paying a listing fee to set up the store, and you'll be paying commission on sales.
And in terms of the opportunity, we tend to think of it as being selling, and I tend to think of it, it's wrong to use the term we, but I tend to think of it in terms of shipping products or services to China, whereas actually, of course, we see a lot of, if we're thinking just of China for a second, lots of Chinese over here. So is that something that you advise on as well, Derek, in terms of the opportunity to sell to the Chinese who want to physically come to the UK?
Yes, I think what we found is rather interesting, that people will visit the UK, and we have a lot of Chinese tourists. They'll buy a product in the UK. They'll then continue to buy that product online when they get back. And they'll also become advocates for that product. So there's social media networking sort of dynamic, which is more mature than a lot of European and US markets, where there is so much noise, as we talked about, that people looked to an advisor, look to an advocate, and what we call a key influencer, a key opinion former, where people will go to their blog, regular social media outputs, etc., and they will be an expert in a specific market. That could be makeup, it could be shoes, it could be whatever. So they become a conduit for your sales. And so what often happens is people come to the UK, they engage with a brand, they take that brand back with them, and they become an opinion leader that people will come to, or they'll recommend it to their friends on a much smaller level, less formal level. They become a seller for your product and your brand. So
does that mean? What immediately springs to mind is, most businesses are not particularly good at CRMs and keeping in touch with existing customers. But it's even more important if you're dealing with somebody from a different country, because they might well become an advocate. So you need a way of keeping in touch with them or engaging with them, don't you?
You do, and I think one of the things we recommend is, even before you think about creating a presence, an online store or whatever it might be in China, that you get your head around the social media channels and things like WeChat. Maybe register for an account.
And can you do that in the UK? Or
you can.
You can, okay.
And by just repeated exposure of your brand, for example, you'll build a presence, you'll build a visibility. You will often get approached by resellers and distributors and opinion leaders to see if they can support you, often for a fee. So you have to be careful of that, what you commit to, etc., and never ever commit to exclusives.
Right. Okay.
which is really important. So yes, you have to understand the landscape, but you do need a partner. I think whether that's an e-marketplace, whether it's a social media influencer, whether it's a distributor, reseller, even a retailer, that you do, for a small business, you don't have the bandwidth
No.
to get your head around that, the complexity of the market.
No.
So be prepared to partner and take a long time to find the right partner.
And do you help on that front? Because I mean, I wouldn't know where to start.
Yes, we do. I think, if we go back to the embassy and consulate model, having experts on the ground who already have relationships in that sector, if they're an expert in retail, for example. So they're a guide through the minefield of finding the right partner in that country.
Because you wouldn't know who to trust, would you?
Well, you wouldn't, and also you wouldn't know necessarily where to start looking.
No.
And if you're a small business, you don't have the bandwidth. You're busy running your business, and so the risk to your business for trying to export can be huge. So having a partner is the right approach.
And if you were a small business owner now, Derek, would you be? What market would you be looking at? Where would you see the gap in the market to think, oh,
Geographically,
yeah,
it depends on
and
the sector.
product-wise, I guess.
If I made a high-end fashion
Yeah.
product with a good backstory, I would certainly be looking at promoting that in China and the Middle East.
And the Middle East,
Yeah.
okay. Any high-end fashion? Female rather than male?
Both, actually.
Would you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So British tailoring
Yeah.
is well respected.
But it would have to be made here, or at least some of it made.
I think if the story is British,
Yeah.
I think there's an expectation that in a global marketplace, the chance of finding any product with 100% homemade components, whatever that might be, is unlikely, and I don't think there's the expectation. But if it's designed in Britain and part manufactured in Britain, it's a British company with a long heritage. So if you can tick those boxes, I think you're onto a good start at least.
And you said in the Middle East as well.
Yes, I think so. I think anywhere where there's a middle class that are growing in wealth,
Yeah.
they
And
look.
is that true in the Middle East as well then?
Yeah, absolutely. In
Is it?
a lot of
Okay.
countries, yeah.
Because we tend to always focus on China, don't we? What about India then? Because I mean, in terms of population, they're probably bigger than China, aren't they?
I haven't seen the latest figures. They're certainly about the same. They're
Yeah.
certainly vast market.
Yeah.
But India has a lot of trade barriers.
Oh, do they?
There's a lot of tariffs that make, depending on your sector and your product, but a lot of tariffs that make it uneconomical.
Oh, right.
A lot of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
So it's ironically.
So a democratic state is
Well,
more bureaucratic than the communists.
Well, ironically, for a country we've had such long
Yeah.
relationships with, China is a much more open market than India.
Right.
So at the moment, and I don't think that will change anytime soon. I think China is opening up more and more. So
Yeah.
and don't forget the rest of Southeast Asia as well. So
Okay.
Indonesia is a massive population, a massively growing market. Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, all very, very fast-growing markets. So,
And in Eastern Europe or Europe, I mean, presumably exports to Europe are still huge for us.
they're our biggest export
Yeah.
markets, and France and Germany are our biggest export markets, and they're our biggest e-commerce markets as
Yeah.
well. So it's the usual top 10 you'd expect. Germany, France, Scandinavian countries, Italy and Spain. But Poland is a big e-commerce market and a very mature e-commerce market. And
Okay.
as I've said earlier, it's covered by multiple marketplaces that can get you a listing in half a dozen countries by listing on one site. So it's certainly worth exploring that.
So there's a temptation, isn't there, I guess, in my mind to think, well, it's China's where it's at because of the growth, etc.
Yeah.
Whereas, as we said, you don't want to ignore the obvious ones, which might actually be in Europe, even with Brexit, assuming there's some sort of normality.
Well, who knows? And I certainly can't
I
make
don't think
any
anybody
comments
does. That's
on
the
that.
problem, isn't it?
But I think that's a good point, is that, China is a massive market, but, shipping to China and the complexity of that, and warehousing there, etc., it adds risk, cost,
Yeah.
and time. If you can ship to France,
Yeah. You can do that in your post office.
you can do it in a, day, 24 hours across the channel. So, and also those logistics chains are well established and mature. So if you can make an export success in France, Germany, Holland and Belgium, for example, fulfillment is a lot easier,
Yes.
a lot cheaper, a lot more economical and less risk.
So from everything you've said, it sounds to me as if what you really need, if you're not in the market already, is some real strategic thought in terms of where's the best opportunity, who do you partner with, what's involved, as you said, start about your social media presence.
Yeah.
And is that at the stage that you would like to get involved, Derek?
I think go back to my 3 services, if you like. So the first thing is that as a company, you're either exporting and it's not going as you'd like it to, or you're thinking about exporting for the first time, then let's talk.
Yeah.
Let's do that diagnostics. That first phase of looking at what you're doing and making sure you're fit for purpose, that's really about getting ready for the UK. So being the best you can be in the UK.
Okay.
Before you even think about other markets. And then we use the normal tools like, well, you'll know where your inquiries are coming from. We'll look at Google Analytics to see where your searches are coming from. We'll use our background knowledge to understand where your product might fit what market. And all of that together, we'll then say, all right, well, here's the top 3 target markets.
So you can come with a blank sheet of paper and say...
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So if we can shortlist 3 markets,
Yeah.
and maybe e-marketplaces are a good way to test the water. So we'll list on 3 different geographies, maybe your top 5 products, test the water, see if there's demand there. It's a very cheap way of getting, doing a bit of market research into whether your products fit. And then if you find that you're selling a healthy amount via a marketplace, obviously you're losing sales commission, so you're losing margin. But if the demand's high enough, then you think about, well, maybe I then start translating my website and taking back my margin and controlling my customers more. And building my brand and, as you say, CRM, building those relationships and owning those relationships, which you tend to lose with the marketplace. Then that's the way to go. But it's step by step. And I think it's, I think the one thing I have learned is that nobody knows and there's no guarantee of success.
No.
So the ability to, at low risk, low cost and quickly get your products and your brand into a market and just see what happens.
Yeah. Do things surprise you then sometimes where you think, well, this is going to be a runner and actually doesn't, and vice versa, ones where you're not, not quite so convinced and actually they do really well?
And I think that there are, yes. I mean, there's a client of mine that makes jams.
Okay.
British jams, and they're very good products, very high quality. Something I didn't know was China is the biggest honey producer in the world by a mile. And this jam company also does honey and sells honey into the Chinese market, which is absolutely impossible.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to that quality.
And the provenance.
The trust.
Yeah.
The British, I think they've got a royal warrant as well. So all of that story, all of that quality, all of the confidence that it gives a customer, and even the kudos of showing their friends, look at, you've got your Chinese honey, which is, mass produced and has certain characteristics, but I'm using this product. There's still opportunities.
Yeah.
And you'd never have known that
if
you just did the market research and said, well, that's impossible, we can't compete there.
Yes, there's no gap there.
So again, I go back to my model, which is test the water, dip your toe in. It's cheap and quick.
Yeah.
And see what works.
And do you hold the hand through the process in terms of, it's not just you initially setting things up, it's...
No. So I'll make introductions to our people on the ground, but I'll also make introductions to our e-commerce marketplace partners. They will provide you with some account management and support all the way through the process. There's a lot of work to do yourself.
Sure.
But
there's a lot of support there, but the sound of it. Does
There
this
is.
support cost money?
no, it's all free.
My
Everything
goodness,
we do
Derek.
is free. And I'll work with my clients for as long as they need my support.
Okay.
We also have very small grants that we can
Okay.
help to grease the wheels a little and get you listed, and so it's all there to help support SMEs export and grow.
So there's no, as far as I can see, there's no downside to anybody having a conversation, an initial conversation with you, Derek, to say, this is my thoughts, can we meet, can we talk? There's no downside to that at all, is there?
It's a no risk.
And no risk, no brainer.
So we've got lots of experience. We've
Sure.
got lots of schemes. We've got lots of relationships and
Yeah.
partnerships.
There's no point me trying to do it on my own, is there?
And it's been done
Yeah.
over many years, and I think the one thing you learn very quickly is that business relies on relationships,
Yeah.
and overcoming cultural barriers to relationships is critical.
Yes.
And if you've got someone on the ground who gets it,
Yeah.
that's going to save you a lot of time,
Yeah,
and a
no,
lot of cost.
absolutely. So how do people get in touch with you, Derek?
Well, they can email me.
Okay, and I know you've got a great email address.
I have. It's derek.scanlon@mobile.trade.gov.uk.
Rolls straight off the tongue.
Yep.
So Derek.Scanlon,
Yep.
that's SCANLON, at
mobile.trade.gov.uk.
and that's the first place that people should go to, really, is email you in the first instance.
I think, if you want to talk to someone directly, email me.
Yeah.
If you want to get an idea of the umbrella of other services, not just the digital services, but everything else we do, you can go to a website called great.gov.uk.
Great.
Great.
GREAT,
Yep.
not the other one.
No. And so that sort of sits below a campaign called Exporting is Great,
Oh, I've seen that.
which you may have seen
Yeah,
on
yeah.
TV and posters. So there's a website that captures all of the things we do and all of the offers we have. So great.gov.uk.
Okay, thank you for that, Derek. And having worked with Derek, and I know the work he does, I would urge anybody who's thinking about exporting. I can't see there's a downside to talking to Derek, because we should have said at the beginning is actually you're hugely experienced in business generally, and in digital channels and everything else. So this is a man who's done it. So you need to be talking
Been
to
there,
him.
done it.
Been there, done it, got the T-shirt. And finally, Derek, something I always ask people, and I know we talked about this before, if knowing what you know now about life, having been around the block a little bit,
Yes.
what would you tell your younger self? What advice, if you could give and go back X number of years, what advice would you give your younger self?
Well, I think when you're young, there's an expectation that there's a progression that's linear in life, where wealth, relationships, possession, whatever it might be that interests you, it will continue to improve as you go forward in life. And I think what you'll look back on afterwards is that you will find that that's not true, that you will hit some milestones and barriers, and you'll have setbacks. And it's how you overcome them, how you start again. It might be business, it might be relationships, it might be whatever. How you overcome them and go again is the measure of who you are, and that's where you learn the most about who you are. So I wouldn't have missed those for the world.
No, that's a very good answer. That's absolutely true as well. There's nothing in life linear, is there?
No.
At all.
And it would be boring if it was.
Yeah, no, that's certainly very true. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time, Derek. It's been really useful. There'll be a transcript of the recording as well on our website, which is businessgrowthclub.net together, and this will be on iTunes and Spreaker and various other channels. So thanks very much for listening.